In the tranquil town of Brookville, nestled amidst vast cornfields, the residents had a peculiar tradition. Every year, during the month of October, they would erect scarecrows in the fields to celebrate the harvest. However, there was one scarecrow, in particular, that had become a source of apprehension among the locals: the Scary Scarecrow. The Scary Scarecrow stood at the southern end of Old Johnson's cornfield. Its appearance was eerie even in the light of day. Its weathered straw body was clothed in old, tattered garments that loosely hung over the wooden frame. The face was a faded cloth mask, adorned with a twisted smile and empty eyes made of black buttons. No one knew who had built it or why it looked so different from the other friendly scarecrows dotting the landscape. As the days grew shorter and the nights darker, rumors about the Scary Scarecrow spread. It was said that on certain nights, its position subtly shifted, as if it were gazing beyond the cornfield. Some swore they heard strange noises coming from the direction of the scarecrow, whispers carried by the nighttime wind. One of the most disturbing stories involved a young woman named Sarah, whose parents were local farmers. Sarah used to help with farm chores but avoided going anywhere near the Scary Scarecrow. One night, returning home after a town party, Sarah decided to take a shortcut through the cornfield to get home faster. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, and darkness seemed to envelop her. As she traversed the field, Sarah felt a chill down her spine. She turned around and saw the Scary Scarecrow in the distance, illuminated by a fleeting moonbeam. Sarah's heart raced as she noticed the scarecrow's position seemed different from what she remembered. She tried to run, but it felt like the cornfield stretched endlessly around her, as if she were being drawn toward the scarecrow. The whispers began, a low, unintelligible murmur that seemed to come from all directions. Sarah stumbled, trying to get away, but her feet sank into the soft earth. Fear gripped her as she realized she was not alone there. Something moved among the rows of corn around her, something she couldn't see clearly but felt watching her. And then, a shadow loomed before her, dark and imposing. The Scary Scarecrow stood in front of her, its lifeless eyes fixed on her. Sarah's heart pounded in her ears as she struggled to scream, but no sound came from her throat. What she saw on the Scarecrow's face sent chills down her spine. What happened to Sarah that night remains a mystery in Brookville. Her parents found her unconscious in the cornfield the next morning in a state of shock. She was never the same since, unable to articulate what truly happened. The Scary Scarecrow remained at its post, silently watching as the autumn days faded away, waiting for its next victim. The following months were bleak for Sarah and the Brookville community. The incident in the cornfield left deep scars in the young woman's mind, causing her to avoid any mention of the Scary Scarecrow. Her parents, worried, tried to comfort her, but something in Sarah's distant expression indicated that she was no longer fully present. Meanwhile, other strange occurrences began to haunt Brookville. Farm animals mysteriously vanished, leaving behind only inexplicable traces of destruction. Residents began to report strange noises during the night, as if something large and heavy were moving through the fields. One night, Old Johnson, the owner of the field where the Scary Scarecrow stood, decided to investigate. He had never believed in the rumors about the scarecrow, but now, with the ominous atmosphere hanging over the town, he could no longer ignore the strange events. Armed with a lantern and a shovel, Old Johnson crossed the cornfield toward the scarecrow. The moon was once again obscured by dark clouds, leaving the landscape shrouded in darkness. He cautiously approached the spot where the Scary Scarecrow stood. As Johnson drew nearer, the lantern illuminated the scarecrow's macabre figure. The cloth face with the twisted smile seemed to stare directly at him, piercing his soul with an intense cold. Old Johnson tried to shake off the feeling of fear that overwhelmed him and focused on examining the scarecrow. That's when he noticed something disturbing. The scarecrow's feet were sunk into the ground, as if they were rooted. Johnson crouched down and began to dig around the scarecrow's feet, his rapid breath forming white clouds in the cold night air. As the shovel struck the earth, a shape began to emerge. It was an ancient wooden statue carved into a grotesque human form, covered in layers of straw and cloth. Johnson recoiled in horror when he saw what was beneath the disguise of the Scary Scarecrow. The statue depicted an ancient being, a faceless entity that the town's oldest residents had whispered about in forgotten legends. It was said to be a dark guardian, tasked with protecting the fields in exchange for sinister tributes. Old Johnson barely had time to process this discovery when something moved behind him. A shadow rose from the cornfield, a dark and imposing presence that seemed to emanate malevolent energy. He turned slowly and saw a tall, dark figure standing among the rows of corn, its eyes gleaming with a menacing light. Johnson's heart nearly stopped as he realized he was no longer dealing with a mere scarecrow, but something much older and more terrible. He barely had time to scream before the shadow enveloped him, leaving only the echo of a lost cry in the darkness of the night. As the wind whispered through Brookville's empty fields, the Scary Scarecrow remained at its post, a dark sentinel guarding ancient secrets. The town, now shrouded in fear and mystery, awaited the next ominous chapter of this terrifying tale. Days dragged on in Brookville, steeped in tense silence. Residents avoided the cornfields and kept their doors locked at night. Old Johnson's disappearance left the community in shock, and sinister rumors spread like smoke through the deserted streets. Sarah, still shaken by the encounter in the cornfield, spent her days staring out the window of her home, lost in dark thoughts. She felt the gaze of the Scary Scarecrow upon her whenever she closed her eyes, an unsettling presence that followed her even into the recesses of her mind. A year passed since that fateful night when a new family decided to move to Brookville. Ignoring the whispered warnings and the concerned looks of the few remaining residents, they bought a property on the outskirts of town. On the first day of the following spring, as the first green shoots began to emerge in the once gloomy fields, the new family was seen exploring the area around their house. Amidst laughter and childish play, they crossed the cornfield until they reached the lonely scarecrow. As dusk fell, when the golden sun began to set on the horizon, a scream echoed across the fields. The remaining residents of Brookville quickly gathered, fearing the worst. What they found among the rows of corn was an indescribable scene of terror. The scarecrow, once motionless and sinister, now stood with a life of its own. Straw and cloth twisted and transformed into a grotesque, faceless figure, engulfing the new family in its pale arms. Screams echoed across the landscape as the scarecrow voraciously absorbed its prey. Since then, no one has dared to venture near that cursed cornfield. Brookville, now a town of shadows and buried secrets, remained as a grim reminder that not all harvests are destined for prosperity. And the Scary Scarecrow, with its eternal vigilance, patiently awaits for more tributes on dark autumn nights.